Angela Robinson had grown used to bad news arriving in the quiet hours, those moments when the world outside seemed to rest but her own heart could not. As a night shift nurse at a small community hospital in Detroit, she lived in rhythms of beeping monitors, whispered prayers, and the soft shuffling of tired feet. It was during one of those gray mornings, when the sunlight spilled like weak tea across the cracked linoleum floor of her kitchen, that the phone call came. "Mrs. Robinson, this is Principal Hernandez. I'm afraid Marcus will have to sit out of extracurricular activities until the fees are paid. We've already sent notices, but since no payment has come, we had no choice." Angela held the phone against her ear as if she hadn't heard right. I sent the money," she whispered, almost to herself. Her eyes drifted to the small calendar pinned above the fridge, the date circled in red. The due date for Marcus's activity fees. She had mailed the check last week, except not to the school. The truth pricked like a thorn she could no longer ignore. She had sent that money, all $250 hard-earned dollars, to her late husband's brother, Calvin, after yet another desperate phone call about an overdue utility bill. Her chest tightened. She could still hear his words from that night. "Angie, you know you're all we got. Family sticks together, right? God bless you for helping." And she had helped, like she always did. Now Marcus, her sweet, restless 16-year-old, would sit in the hallway while his classmates rehearsed for the debate team's regional competition. A door had been shut in his face because she had opened her wallet to people who treated her less like family and more like a bank. Angela set the phone down and sank into one of the mismatched kitchen chairs. The wood creaked beneath her weight, as if echoing her exhaustion. The clock on the stove blinked 7:42 a.m., reminding her she'd been awake for nearly 20 hours straight. She rubbed her eyes with the back of her hand, still faintly smelling of antiseptic and latex from the hospital. Around her, the apartment felt quiet in that unsettling way only poor households did. No humming dishwasher, no working dryer, just the silence of things broken and left unrepaired. The refrigerator groaned like an old man each time it cycled on. A water stain, brown and spreading like a bruise, decorated the ceiling. It wasn't the life she had imagined at 50. Once there had been dreams, weekend cookouts, family road trips, maybe even a small house with a backyard. But those dreams had been buried with her husband, Daniel, 7 years ago, in a coffin polished just enough to hide how cheaply it had been made. Angela forced herself up and padded down the narrow hallway to Marcus's room. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, sneakers half-tied, backpack slouched at his side. His face carried that careful teenage mask of indifference, but the slump in his shoulders betrayed him. "Baby," Angela said softly. He didn't look up. "Don't worry about it, Ma. It's just debate team. Not like I was gonna win anything." Her heart clenched. Marcus had been practicing his speeches in front of the bathroom mirror for weeks, his voice echoing against the tiles. She had heard him quoting Martin Luther King Jr. and James Baldwin when he thought no one was listening. He cared more than he'd ever admit. Angela stepped into the room, kneeling slightly to meet his eyes. "I'll fix this," she promised. He shrugged the way only a 16-year-old could, as if to say promises didn't matter when life had already handed down its verdict. "It's fine, I'm used to it." Those words sliced deeper than the principal's phone call. "I'm used to it." Used to being the kid who sat out, who watched from the sidelines, who learned early that dreams were a luxury his family couldn't afford. Angela reached out, brushing a hand across his cheek. His skin was warm, his jawline already sharpening into manhood. He looked so much like his father at that age it made her chest ache. When Marcus left for school, shoulders hunched beneath the weight of both books and disappointment, Angela lingered at the doorway. She waited until the echo of his footsteps disappeared down the stairwell before letting the tears come. She wept not just for the unpaid fee, but for the accumulation of all the little losses. For Chloe, her daughter, who worked 2 part-time jobs while studying pre-med because scholarships never stretched far enough. For Marcus, who had inherited not just his father's brown eyes, but also the burden of being the man of the house long before he should have. For herself, carrying double shifts that gnawed at her bones while the Robinson family, Daniel's family, seemed to think her paycheck was their inheritance. Her phone buzzed again. A message this time. Calvin, Angie, could you send another $150? Gas companies threatening to shut us off. Angela stared at the glowing screen, her hands trembling. She wanted to scream, to hurl the phone against the wall, to write back the words that burned in her throat. Ask your own family. Ask the ones who show up at your barbecues but never at my door. Ask anyone but me. But she didn't type those words. Not yet. Instead, she poured herself a cup of yesterday's coffee, reheated in the microwave, bitter and thin. She drank it slowly, as if swallowing her anger might make it disappear. But it didn't. It sat heavy in her chest, a reminder that something had to change. Angela had lived half a century learning how to endure racism that shadowed her every step, endure widowhood when her heart still longed for Daniel's steady hand, endure exhaustion that bent her spine and blurred her vision. But this, watching her children pay the price for her endless endurance, this she could not accept. As she rinsed the empty mug, her reflection flickered in the window above the sink. The woman staring back at her looked older than 50, dark circles, silver streaks threading through her hair, skin worn by nights under fluorescent hospital lights. Yet there was something else there too. A glimmer, faint but undeniable, like the first crack of dawn. Angela didn't know how or when, but she knew this morning's phone call was more than bad news. It was a warning, a turning point, a whisper from somewhere deep inside. Enough. And though the day stretched ahead with its usual burdens, another shift, another bill, another plea for money, Angela Robinson, mother of 2, widow, nurse, survivor, felt the first stirrings of resolve. She didn't yet understand the battles to come, the betrayals still waiting, or the unlikely hand that would one day reach to pull her from the shadows. All she knew was that for the first time in years, she was done being used. This was the morning her story began again. Angela closed the door gently after Marcus left, and the silence pressed in like a heavy blanket. She moved back to the kitchen, her eyes lingering on the water stain above, the faint smell of bleach and last night's fried chicken still hanging in the air. She thought of Marcus's face, the practiced indifference of a boy who had already learned disappointment, and it brought her back to another day, years ago, when the world had shifted beneath her feet. The day Daniel died. It had been an ordinary Wednesday. He was working at the auto plant then, one of the last decent-paying jobs left in the neighborhood. Angela remembered packing him a lunch, leftover meatloaf wrapped in foil, an apple, 2 oatmeal cookies Chloe had begged her to bake the night before. He kissed her cheek, told her he'd be home by 6, and walked out the door with his hard hat tucked under one arm. He never came home. The call came near sunset. An accident. A fall. Instant, they had said, as if the speed of death could soften the blow. She had sat in the hospital chapel, Chloe clutching one hand, Marcus still in his Spider-Man pajamas on the other, and tried to imagine the rest of her life without the man who had been her anchor. The years since had blurred together, long shifts, overdue bills, moments of fierce pride when Chloe graduated high school, or when Marcus brought home drawings of superheroes with "Mom" scrawled across their chests. But underneath, each triumph ran a quiet river of struggle, relentless and cold. The Robinson family had been there at first. Daniel's mother, Evelyn, brought casseroles for a few weeks. His sister Victoria came by with second-hand clothes for Chloe. And Calvin, always smooth-talking, always smiling, stood at Angela's side at the funeral, promising, "Don't you worry, Angie. We're your family now. We got you." She had wanted to believe it. She had needed to believe it. But promises, she would learn, are cheaper than casseroles. The first request had come 6 months later. Calvin again, a job layoff, a landlord demanding rent. He had stood in her doorway wringing his hands, tears shimmering in his eyes. Angela remembered the kids in the living room, Chloe bent over her homework, Marcus asleep with his toy truck clutched against his chest. She had reached for her checkbook without hesitation. Just this once, she told herself, but just once became again and again. Property taxes for the old family house, a medical bill for Evelyn, repairs for Victoria's car. Each time, Calvin would start with the same line, "You're all we got." Each time, Angela told herself she was honoring Daniel's memory by keeping his family afloat. She didn't notice at first how much it cost her. A skipped dentist appointment, a credit card balance that crept higher, shoes bought at the thrift store instead of new. The sacrifices seemed small in the moment, but over time, they accumulated like bricks on her back. Angela picked up the envelope of unpaid bills from the counter and leafed through it absent-mindedly. Rent, gas, the minimum payment on her credit card. She thought of the $250 that should have kept Marcus on the debate team, now vanished into Calvin's pockets, and her chest burned. She remembered one night, maybe 2 years after Daniel's death, when Chloe had asked why her birthday cake was store-bought instead of homemade. Angela had smiled, brushing flour from her apron she hadn't even used, and said she was too tired from work. The truth was she couldn't afford the ingredients after sending $500 to cover the Robinsons' property tax. The lie had sat on her tongue like ash. Chloe had never asked again. She learned too early that questions about money only deepened her mother's worry lines. Angela moved to the living room and lowered herself onto the couch, springs sighing beneath her. She looked at the family photo on the wall, the last one before Daniel's death. His arms slung casually around her shoulders, Chloe smiling with a gap-toothed grin, Marcus perched on his father's knee. They looked happy, whole, untouched by grief or debt or obligations that weren't truly theirs. Her eyes drifted to the wedding photo on the adjacent wall. Daniel in a rented suit, her in a simple cream dress borrowed from a cousin. They had been poor then too, but back then, poverty had been softened by laughter, by the certainty that they faced it together. Now she faced it alone, and alone the world seemed merciless. The first year after Daniel's passing, Angela had worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital, then picked up home care jobs on weekends. Her feet had blistered inside her sneakers, her hands cracked from constant scrubbing, but she pushed through. Because every dollar mattered. Because she believed her children deserved stability, even if she had to bleed for it. And still, whenever the Robinsons called, she gave. Once, when Calvin came asking for help to repair Evelyn's roof, Angela emptied the last of her savings, money she had been tucking away for Chloe's college application fees. She wrote the check with trembling hands, telling herself there would be time to save again. There wasn't. When Chloe finally received her acceptance letter years later, Angela pawned her wedding ring to cover the costs. The diamond had been small, almost modest to begin with, but selling it felt like cutting out a piece of her heart. She told Chloe she had simply outgrown it, that her fingers had swelled from too many years of nursing shifts. Chloe had looked at her strangely, as though she wanted to question but didn't dare. Angela pressed her palms to her face, breathing deeply. Her apartment smelled faintly of antiseptic and fried onions, the sense of survival. She thought about the many nights she had walked home from the bus stop after midnight, too weary to notice the cold air biting her cheeks. She thought about the whispered prayers, the whispered excuses, the whispered lies she told her children so they wouldn't know just how much she was giving away. For Daniel, she had said to herself, each time she signed another check, each time she handed Calvin cash folded neatly into an envelope, for the man I loved, for the family he left behind. But this morning, with Marcus's shoulders slumped under the weight of disappointment, Angela realized the truth she had long refused to name. It wasn't for Daniel anymore. It was for them. For people who had taken her kindness and ground it into expectation. For a family who had opened their arms at the funeral but closed them every time she needed support. For years she had believed loyalty meant sacrifice. Now she saw it more clearly. It meant servitude. The phone buzzed again on the counter. Another message, another request. Angela didn't need to read it to know what it said. Her hand hovered over the device, then drew back. For the first time in years, she let it buzz unanswered. She sat in the quiet of her apartment, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, and felt something stirring in her chest. Not relief, not yet, but the faint, trembling outline of a decision forming. Her life had been built on endurance. Maybe it was time to build it on something else. By the time Chloe came home that evening, Angela had already changed into her scrubs, readying herself for another long night at St. Mary's. The girl dropped her backpack on the floor with a heavy thud, sending a ripple through the tiny apartment that felt more like thunder than a simple gesture. Chloe was 22, but her eyes, sharp and weary, carried the fatigue of someone older. Between classes, her part-time shifts at the bookstore, and her clinical rotations, she rarely stopped moving. Her braids were pulled back into a bun, her face bare of makeup, her expression guarded. "Principal called me today," she said without preamble. Angela's hand froze over the kettle she had just filled. "About Marcus." Chloe crossed her arms, her jaw set. "About the debate team. He told me what happened. He said they kicked him out because you didn't pay the fees." Angela swallowed hard, the sound loud in the stillness. "I meant to," she said softly. "But you didn't," Chloe shot back. "Because you sent it to Uncle Calvin, didn't you?" Angela felt her chest tighten. "Chloe, don't Chloe me, Ma," her daughter interrupted, her voice trembling with restrained anger. "You've been doing this for years. Every time they call, you find the money. Meanwhile, I'm patching up my shoes with glue and Marcus can't even join a school club. Do you not see what this is doing to us?" Angela turned off the kettle and leaned against the counter, pressing her palms flat to the cool laminate. Her daughter's words hit with more force than she wanted to admit. "Their family," Angela whispered, almost to herself. Chloe laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "So are we, or did you forget that?" The front door creaked then, and Marcus shuffled in. His backpack hung loose from one strap, his shoulders slumped. He paused when he saw Chloe standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, and their mother staring at the counter like it might give her answers. "What's going on?" he asked cautiously. "Nothing," Angela said quickly, too quickly. Chloe's eyes narrowed. "Tell him." "Tell me what?" Marcus asked. "That you're not on the debate team anymore because Mom decided Uncle Calvin's bills are more important than your future." "Chloe," Angela's voice cracked like a whip, but the damage was done. Marcus's face twisted, first in confusion, then in something darker, hurt, anger, betrayal. "Is that true?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost fragile. Angela's throat constricted. She wanted to say no. She wanted to protect him from the truth, to spare him the weight of her choices. But lies had carried them this far, and lies were what had hollowed out their lives. "Yes," she admitted finally, her voice breaking. "I sent the money to Calvin. He needed it." Marcus let out a bitter laugh, one far too old for 16 years. "He needed it. I needed it, Ma. But I guess I don't matter as much." "Don't you ever say that," Angela snapped, stepping forward. "You matter more than anything in this world." "Do I?" His voice rose now, raw and cutting. "Because it feels like I'm always last on the list, always second to Uncle Calvin and his problems, always second to people who don't give a damn about us." Chloe put a hand on Marcus's shoulder, steadying him. Her eyes never left their mother. "You've been breaking your back for everyone but your own kids, Ma, and we're the ones paying for it." Angela wanted to argue, wanted to defend herself, wanted to say that she had been doing it for Daniel, for his memory, for the promise she thought she'd made the day she said, "I do." But the words caught in her throat, because deep down she knew Chloe was right. Her daughter's gaze softened just slightly, though her tone stayed sharp. "Dad's gone, Ma. He's been gone a long time. And you're not honoring him by letting his family drain us dry. You're just letting us drown with them." The silence that followed was unbearable. The apartment seemed smaller than ever, the walls pressing in. Outside, the rumble of a passing bus rattled the window pane, a reminder of the world moving on, indifferent to their struggle. Angela turned away, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She didn't want her children to see her break, not like this, but she also couldn't deny the truth ringing in their words. "I'm sorry," she whispered finally, though the words felt weak, insufficient. "I never meant to hurt you." "Sorry doesn't fix it," Marcus muttered, his voice low but sharp as glass. He pulled away from Chloe's hand and stormed down the hall, slamming his bedroom door behind him. The echo lingered, vibrating through Angela's bones. Chloe stayed where she was, her arms still crossed, her eyes still locked on her mother. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Chloe said, "You can keep making excuses for them, or you can start choosing us. But you can't do both. Not anymore." Angela nodded faintly, her throat tight. She wanted to promise her daughter she would change, that this moment would be the turning point. But promises, she had learned, were easy. It was action that cost something. Chloe grabbed her backpack and headed for her room, her footsteps heavy with frustration. "Think about it, Ma," she called over her shoulder. "Think real hard." And then she was gone too, leaving Angela alone in the kitchen, the kettle still cooling on the stove, the silence of her fractured family pressing down on her from every side. Angela sank into the nearest chair, pressing her hands together like she used to in church when she still believed prayer might change something. Her children were right. She knew they were right. But knowing and acting were two very different things. For years, Angela had told herself that endurance was love, that giving until there was nothing left was how you honored family. Tonight, as her children's anger still hung in the air like smoke after a fire, she wondered if love might mean something else. Something harder. Something she wasn't sure she had the strength to give. She sat there long after the apartment had gone still, the city sounds fading into night. And for the first time, Angela Robinson wondered not what she owed, but what she deserved. Angela's shift began the way most of them did, bleary-eyed, body aching, but determined to push through. The hospital smelled of bleach and sorrow, the hallways lined with people clutching hope like a frayed blanket. By midnight, the rhythm of her work had consumed her. Check vitals, adjust Roman 4, comfort a child, calm a panicked family member. Each action felt both ordinary and monumental, like drops of water-carving stone. At 2 a.m, they wheeled in a man. Mid-50s, neatly dressed despite the emergency, his face pale beneath the fluorescent lights. He clutched his chest, his breathing ragged. Angela moved quickly, her instincts sharper than her fatigue. "Mr. Coleman," one of the EMTs said. 55-year-old male, chest pain, elevated blood pressure. No history of heart attack, but family history significant. Angela leaned over him, her voice steady, calm. "Sir, you're going to be all right. You're in good hands. I need you to focus on your breathing, nice and slow." The man's eyes flickered open, hazel, framed by crow's feet that hinted at years of laughter and strain. He gave a weak nod. "I don't want to die tonight," he whispered. "You won't," Angela said firmly, squeezing his hand. "Not on my watch." Hours later, after tests, after medication, after the terrifying uncertainty of waiting for lab results, Mr. Richard Coleman was resting in a private room. Angela came in to check his Roman 4 line. He was awake now, sitting upright against the pillows, his breathing steadier. "You're the nurse who was with me when I came in," he said, his voice gravelly but grateful. "Yes," Angela replied, adjusting the drip. "I'm Angela." "Angela," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. "I remember your face. You told me I wasn't going to die." She gave a small, tired smile. "And I was right." He chuckled softly, then winced at the strain. I suppose I owe you a thank you, and maybe more than that. Angela shook her head. You don't owe me anything. This is my job. But Richard studied her with a gaze that felt heavier than most. You say that like it's nothing, but I've been around long enough to know when someone goes beyond what their job requires. You stayed, you talked to me, you didn't let me panic. That matters. Angela wasn't used to compliments. Not anymore. Praise was scarce in her life, drowned out by criticism, demands, and endless requests. She busied herself with the chart, unwilling to let him see the way his words stirred something fragile inside her. 2 days later, when Richard was discharged, Angela happened to be on the floor. He caught sight of her and waved her over. He was dressed in a tailored jacket now, expensive watch glinting beneath the cuff. He looked every bit the man of means. I was hoping I'd see you, he said warmly. You saved me, Angela. I don't forget things like that. He handed her a business card. If you ever need anything at all, please call. Angela hesitated, the card between her fingers. She didn't move to pocket it right away. I don't take favors, she said quietly. Richard tilted his head, studying her again with that same steady gaze. Then call it gratitude or friendship, whichever makes you more comfortable. She forced a polite smile, slid the card into her pocket, and wished him well. But as she watched him leave with his driver, stepping into a sleek black car that gleamed under the hospital lights, Angela felt the sharp contrast of their worlds. His life seemed smooth, polished, untouched by the kind of sacrifices that had etched lines into her face. She told herself she would never use that card. Men like him didn't belong in her world, and she didn't belong in theirs. The following evening, Angela arrived home to find Chloe sitting at the kitchen table, bills spread out like fallen leaves. The girl's brow was furrowed, her pen tapping against the overdue notices. Rent's due in 4 days, Chloe said flatly. We don't have enough if Marcus wants to keep up with his tutoring sessions, unless, her voice faltered and her eyes flicked toward her mother, unless you're planning to call Calvin again. Angela set her bag down, exhaustion pulling at her shoulders. No, she said firmly, I'm not calling Calvin. Then what? Ma, what's the plan? Angela didn't answer. She thought about the business card tucked into her wallet, its edges already bent from the weight of her hesitation. Don't worry, she said instead, forcing steadiness into her voice. I'll figure it out. But later that night, when the apartment was quiet and her children were asleep, Angela sat alone at the table. She pulled out the card, ran her fingers over the embossed letters. Richard Coleman, Coleman Enterprises. Her reflection wavered in the dark window. For years, she had only known 2 currencies, her labor and her silence. Now a door had appeared, unexpected and gleaming. She didn't know what lay on the other side. But she knew this much. Doors had been closed on her for so long that the sight of one cracked open made her heart ache with both fear and possibility. Angela slid the card back into her wallet, turned off the light, and went to bed. But sleep didn't come easily. Because for the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder if salvation might arrive from somewhere she hadn't expected. Not from the family she bled for, but from a stranger who saw her, if only for a moment, not as a bank or a burden, but as a woman. The weekend came, and with it, a storm Angela hadn't expected. She was in the laundry room of the apartment building, folding Marcus's t-shirts and Chloe's scrubs, when her phone buzzed with a notification. She wiped her damp hands on her pants and glanced down. It was Facebook. She almost never looked at it anymore, except when an old church friend posted family pictures. But the name at the top froze her blood. Victoria Robinson, Daniel's sister. Angela hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Then she opened the post. The first line punched harder than any blow. Some people only pretend to be part of a family until they show their true colors. My brother deserved better than a wife who turned her back on his blood. Beneath it was a picture of the Robinson family at their annual summer barbecue. Everyone smiling, plates of ribs and potato salad, kids running in the background. Everyone except her and her children. And then came the comments. Angela always thought she was better than us. Ungrateful, after everything we did for her. A woman who can't keep a family together doesn't deserve the name Robinson. Angela's hands trembled, the folded shirt slipping to the floor. She scrolled further, each word slicing deeper. They hadn't just excluded her, they were building a case against her, a narrative where she was the villain, heartless and selfish. She could almost hear Victoria's voice behind the words, smooth, polished, always dripping with judgment. Angela imagined her sitting at the long oak dining table in the Robinson house, typing on her phone while sipping sweet tea, her gold rings glinting under the chandelier. Angela wanted to throw the phone against the wall. Instead, she slid it into her pocket and gathered the laundry, her chest hollow. By the time she returned upstairs, Chloe had already seen it. Her daughter sat at the table, phone in hand, her face red with anger. "Mom, what the hell is this?" she demanded, shoving the screen toward Angela. Angela glanced at it, though she didn't need to. She knew the words by heart already. "They're just talking," Angela said softly, trying to steady her voice. "Talking, they're dragging your name through the mud, through our names. Do you realize how humiliating this is? My classmates see this. People at the hospital see this." Angela pressed her lips together. "It'll pass, they're just upset." "Upset? No, Mom, this is hate. They don't care about you, and they never have, and you keep giving them power over us. Why?" Angela opened her mouth, but no words came, because how could she explain the twisted loyalty she still felt to Daniel's memory? How could she admit that part of her still believed sacrifice equaled love? Before she could answer, Marcus burst into the room, phone in hand. His face was pale, his voice sharp. "Everyone's texting me about this. Kids at school are sending me screenshots. They're saying my mom's a leech." "A joke?" His voice cracked, and Angela's heart cracked with it. She reached out, but he pulled away. "You let them do this to us," he spat. "You chose them over us, and this is what we get. Public humiliation." "Congratulations, Mom." He stormed off to his room, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. The apartment fell into silence except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sounds of traffic outside. Angela sank into a chair, her hands shaking. Chloe sat across from her, eyes fierce. "Do you see it now? Do you finally see who they are?" Angela buried her face in her hands. The humiliation, the betrayal, the weight of her children's disappointment, all of it pressed down until she could barely breathe. She thought about all the nights she had scrubbed her hands raw at the hospital, then handed over her paychecks to people who never once thanked her. She thought about Marcus, proud and bright, now mocked because of her choices. She thought about Chloe, fighting so hard for her future, only to be pulled down by the very people she'd been told to call family. Angela lifted her head, her eyes rimmed red but steady. "I see it," she whispered. That night, after Chloe had gone to bed and Marcus's music rumbled faintly through the walls, Angela sat alone in the dark. She opened her wallet, pulled out Richard Coleman's card, and turned it over in her hand. She remembered his words, "If you ever need anything, anything at all, please call." She hadn't wanted to. She still didn't want to. Pride was the last thing she had left, but as she scrolled through Victoria's post again, as she read the names of cousins and church friends piling insults onto her like stones, she felt something break inside. She realized then that her pride had already been stolen by the people who should have protected her, not destroyed her. Angela pressed the card flat on the table. She didn't dial the number. Not yet. But for the first time, she admitted to herself she might. And in that quiet, fragile moment, she understood. The war with the Robinsons was no longer about money. It was about survival. Angela woke to the sound of the front door closing. It was barely dawn, the sky outside still bruised with night. She sat up, heart racing, and reached for her robe. Marcus! His bed was empty, the sheets still warm. Angela slipped on her shoes and hurried down the stairwell of the apartment building. By the time she reached the street, he was already half a block away, a backpack slung over one shoulder, his breath visible in the cold morning air. "Marcus!" she called. Her voice cracked the quiet of the neighborhood. He froze, then turned slowly, his expression a mix of guilt and defiance. "Where are you going at this hour?" Angela asked, pulling her robe tighter. Marcus shifted his weight, staring down at the cracked sidewalk. "Work." Angela blinked. "Work, you're 16. He looked up, his eyes dark, determined. "The corner store on Jefferson. Mister, Pytel said he'd give me shifts before school. Stocking shelves, cleaning up. I can handle it." Angela's throat tightened. "Baby, why?" "Because someone has to," he snapped, his voice trembling. "You're killing yourself at the hospital, Chloe's drowning in bills, and I'm sick of being the kid who doesn't help. Maybe if I work, you won't have to choose between me and Uncle Calvin's problems anymore." Angela's chest ached as if someone had reached inside and wrung her heart dry. The weight of his words was heavier than any insult Victoria could fling from a keyboard. She walked to him, cupping his face in her hands. His skin was cold, his jaw already firming into manhood, but he was still her boy. "Marcus," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "It's not your job to carry this. It's mine." He pulled back. "Then do it better." The word stung sharper than any slap, and then he turned, heading toward Jefferson Street without looking back. Angela returned upstairs in a daze. Chloe was awake now, pouring coffee at the counter, her phone lighting up with another barrage of notifications. She glanced up, her face drawn. Where'd Marcus go? Angela lowered herself into a chair. "To work." Chloe froze, mug halfway to her lips. "Work, what do you mean?" "He took a job at Patel's store," Angela said, her voice hollow. Chloe slammed the mug down so hard coffee sloshed over the rim. "God, Ma, he's 16. He should be worrying about homework, not hustling before sunrise. Do you not see what's happening to us?" Angela buried her face in her hands. "I see it," she whispered. For a long moment, Chloe just stared. Then she set her jaw and nodded sharply, as though she had come to her own decision. "Good, because I'm done watching us get bled dry. Either you stop letting them use you, or—" she trailed off, but the unspoken threat hung heavy in the air, "or you lose us too." That afternoon, during her break at the hospital, Angela sat in the supply closet, the faint smell of antiseptic sharp in her nostrils. Her phone buzzed. A message from Calvin. "Angie, need $400 today. Emergency. Gas bill, you know we'll pay you back." Her thumbs hovered over the screen, trembling. She could feel Marcus's words in her chest, "Then do it better." She could hear Chloe's ultimatum, "Either you stop or you lose us too." For years, she had answered without hesitation. She had drained herself dry to keep the Robinson family afloat, convincing herself it was loyalty, love, obligation. But today, all she felt was exhaustion. Angela typed slowly, her breath shaking as the words appeared. "Ask your family." She stared at the screen for a long moment, then pressed send. The reply came within seconds. The phone buzzed violently in her hand. "What do you mean? Angie, please, don't do this to us. We're counting on you." Another buzz, then another. Then the phone rang, Calvin's name glowing like a curse. Angela let it ring. She sat there in the cramped closet, boxes of gauze stacked to the ceiling, her heart pounding. For the first time in years, she felt something like freedom, sharp, terrifying, but real. When she finished her shift that night, Angela walked home under the glow of street lamps. The city was loud, sirens, barking dogs, the rattle of a bus, but inside her head was only silence. No guilt, no justifications, just silence. She opened the apartment door to find Chloe at the table, studying, and Marcus sprawled on the couch, fast asleep in his hoodie, his backpack still at his feet. His sneakers were caked with dust, his hands smudged from stocking boxes. Angela knelt beside him, brushing his curls gently from his forehead. He stirred but didn't wake. She looked at her children, the two souls she had nearly lost under the weight of obligation, and whispered into the dim apartment, "Never again." She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. The Robinsons would surely fight back. The humiliation might grow louder, but something fundamental had shifted. For years, Angela Robinson had been their safety net. Tonight, with 3 small words, she had cut the cords. And for the first time since Daniel's death, she chose her own family. The calls started the next morning. Angela's phone lit up before sunrise, buzzing across the kitchen table as she packed Marcus's lunch. She let it ring. A voicemail followed, then another. By the time Chloe came out of her room, hair still damp from the shower, there were 6 missed calls and 4 new messages. "Are you going to listen to those?" Chloe asked, nodding toward the phone. Angela shook her head, tucking an apple into Marcus's lunch bag. "If it's important, they'll find another way to say it." Chloe smirked without humor. "Trust me, they will." At noon, during her break at the hospital, Angela finally listened. The first was Calvin, his voice desperate. "Angie, please, they're threatening foreclosure. Mom's beside herself. You can't just walk away like this. We need you." The second was Evelyn, Daniel's mother, her words trembling with practiced sorrow. "You're tearing this family apart. After all we've done for you, you repay us by abandoning us in our time of need? Daniel would be ashamed." Angela closed her eyes. She could almost see Evelyn's face, perfectly powdered, lips painted with that deep red she wore even to funerals, crafting her guilt like a weapon. The third voicemail was shorter, sharper. "Victoria. You're selfish, Angela, you always were. Enjoy watching us lose the house. I hope you can live with yourself." Angela deleted them all. By the weekend, the storm had gone public again. On Facebook, Victoria posted a photo of the Robinsons' lake house, a red for sale sign stabbed into the lawn. 30 years of family memories, lost because some people don't understand loyalty. Blood should mean something. Apparently, it doesn't to everyone. The comments poured in. Cousins, neighbors, even church members chimed in, each adding a stone to the pile of accusations. Angela scrolled through them during her lunch break, her sandwich untouched in front of her. Ungrateful widow. Gold digger turned heartless. If Daniel were alive, he'd never allow this. Her fingers hovered over the screen, but she didn't reply. She didn't need to. The truth sat in her pocket, the months of bank transfers, the years of sacrifices no one cared to remember. Still, the words burned, not because they were true, but because they weren't. That evening, Marcus slammed his textbook shut. "They're making you out to be the villain, Ma, and nobody even knows what really happened." "I know," Angela said softly. "Well, then tell them," Marcus pressed. "Post the proof. Show them the bank statements. Let everybody see who's really been paying their bills." Angela shook her head. "It's not worth it. People believe what they want to believe. Besides," she touched his shoulder gently, "we don't live for their approval anymore." Marcus stared at her, then slumped back in his chair. "I just hate watching them talk about you like that." Angela smiled faintly. "So do I, baby, but silence can be louder than shouting." On Sunday afternoon, as Angela left the hospital, she spotted him, Richard Coleman. He was standing outside, leaning against a sleek black sedan, a wool coat draped over his shoulders despite the crisp fall air. When he saw her, he straightened, offering a warm smile. "Angela." She blinked, caught off guard. "Mr. Coleman, what are you doing here?" "Richard," he corrected gently. "And I was nearby for a meeting. Thought I'd stop by, see how you're doing." Angela adjusted the strap of her bag, uncomfortable with how tired she must have looked, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a hurried bun. "I'm fine," she said. He studied her face with quiet concern. "Are you?" Something in his tone, steady, genuine, not demanding, unraveled her defenses just a little. For weeks she had carried herself like stone, but his questions slipped into the cracks. She exhaled, a sound closer to a sigh than a laugh. "It's been a week." Richard nodded as though he understood more than she said. "Well, if you ever need to talk, or just sit in silence with someone who won't ask for anything, you have my number." Angela almost smiled. "That's rare these days." "Then hold on to it," he said simply. Before she could answer, his driver opened the car door and Richard slipped inside. The sedan pulled away, leaving Angela on the sidewalk, the crisp wind tugging at her scrubs. She stood there a moment longer, her chest lighter than it had been all week. That night, another voicemail came from Evelyn, voice shaking with fury this time. "You've destroyed us, Angela. I hope you're proud. We opened our home to you, called you daughter, and this is how you repay us. When the house is gone, when the family scatters, that will be on your conscience." Angela listened in silence, then pressed delete. She set her phone face down, looked across the table at Chloe studying for her exams, Marcus scribbling math problems, and realized something Evelyn never would. Her conscience was finally clear. The Robinsons were paying the price of their own choices. And for once, Angela wasn't the one bleeding for it. The morning sunlight slanted through the blinds, painting thin stripes across the kitchen table. Angela sat there with her laptop open, the hospital's HR portal glowing on the screen. Her hand hovered over the keyboard, heart pounding harder than it had when she'd first said, "Ask your family." It felt like more than numbers on a screen. It felt like a line in the sand. She typed in the new account information. The checking account she had opened the day before at the credit union across town, under her maiden name, Angela Mitchell. The woman at the counter had smiled kindly when Angela explained she wanted an account in her name only. No questions asked, no judgment. Just a quiet dignity that Angela hadn't felt in years. When she pressed submit, a small green check mark appeared. From now on, her paychecks would flow into her account. Her account. Angela leaned back in her chair, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That evening, as Chloe spread her textbooks across the table and Marcus hunched over his algebra homework, Angela cleared her throat. "I want to tell you both something," she began. Marcus looked up first, pencil still in hand. Chloe raised an eyebrow, cautious but curious. "I changed my direct deposit today," Angela said. "From now on, my pay goes into my account, no one else's." Chloe blinked, then sat back slowly. "You mean?" Angela nodded. "I'm done paying for them. No more checks, no more transfers, it's over." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Chloe let out a sharp breath that sounded almost like laughter, though it was threaded with relief. "Finally." Angela smiled faintly. "I should have done it sooner." Marcus dropped his pencil and came to her side. "So we're really free, for real?" Angela pulled him into her arms, her throat tight with tears. "For real, I chose us. I should have always chosen us." Marcus hugged her back fiercely, and over his shoulder Angela saw Chloe watching, her eyes shining though she tried to hide it. 2 weeks later, Angela found the apartment. It wasn't big, just a one-bedroom in a converted school building. But the moment she stepped inside, sunlight poured through tall windows and onto hardwood floors worn smooth by years of footsteps. The walls were freshly painted, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish, and the kitchen, though small, had a gas stove she hadn't seen in years. The landlord, a silver-haired woman named Mrs. Patterson, handed her the keys. "You look like someone who needs a fresh start," she said kindly. Angela smiled, gripping the keys so tightly they pressed into her palm. "You don't know how right you are." On moving day, Chloe carried in a box of dishes while Marcus dragged in a lamp. The apartment echoed with the sound of their laughter as they arranged their modest belongings in the bright, empty rooms. Angela stood in the middle of the living room, watching them. For years, she had imagined giving her children more: new clothes, reliable cars, vacations they could brag about at school. She hadn't given them those things. But today, she gave them something better: a space untouched by guilt, a home that belonged to them alone. When Marcus set the lamp down, he grinned. "This place actually has light." Chloe smirked, wiping sweat from her forehead. "And no water stains on the ceiling." Angela chuckled softly, her chest warming. "It's ours," she said simply. Chloe crossed the room, slipping her arms around her mother. "Thank you, Ma, for choosing us this time." Angela held her daughter close, the weight of years of sacrifice and regret pressing against the fragile joy of the moment. She whispered into Chloe's hair, "I'll never make that mistake again." That night, the three of them ate pizza on the floor, the boxes spread out across the hardwood. They laughed about the crooked blinds, argued playfully over toppings, and dreamed aloud about how they would decorate the space. Marcus wanted posters of his favorite basketball team, Chloe insisted on a proper desk for her studying, and Angela, though she kept it to herself, longed for a small plant on the windowsill, something green to remind her that life could grow again. As the evening stretched into quiet, Marcus fell asleep with a crust in his hand, Chloe curled up with her notes beside her, and Angela sat awake, leaning against the wall. The city sounds drifted in through the open window: sirens, car horns, a dog barking somewhere down the block. But inside their new home, she felt peace. For the first time in years, Angela Robinson wasn't someone's safety net, someone's last resort, someone's silent donor. She was a mother with her children in a place they could call their own. And that was enough. Angela hadn't planned on seeing them again so soon, but the Robinsons had a way of pulling her back into the storm even after she had walked away. It started with a letter in the mailbox of her new apartment, thick cream paper, the kind you used for weddings or funerals. The handwriting was unmistakable: Evelyn Robinson, her mother-in-law, family meeting. Sunday, 3 p.m. at the house. There was no please, no request. Just a command, as though Angela were still tethered to their will. Chloe rolled her eyes when Angela showed her the envelope. "Don't go, Ma. They'll just try to guilt you again." Marcus snorted. "They don't deserve to see you at all." Angela agreed with them, but something deeper stirred in her chest, an ache, a need. For years, she had bowed her head, swallowed her words, and let their judgment weigh her down. Maybe it was time to stand in the same room and speak the truth they had refused to hear. On Sunday afternoon, Angela put on her plain navy dress, the one she usually saved for church, and walked into the Robinsons' house for the first time in months. The air was thick with tension the moment she crossed the threshold. The living room smelled faintly of lemon polish and old resentment. Evelyn sat in her armchair like a queen on her throne, pearls at her neck, lips tight with disapproval. Victoria stood by the fireplace, arms folded, her glare sharp enough to cut glass. Calvin hovered near the sofa, looking worn but still trying to flash that easy smile. "Angela," Evelyn said coolly, not rising. "You came." Angela met her gaze. "You asked." They all gathered around the dining table, the same one where Angela had once shared Sunday dinners with Daniel, back when family had meant laughter and stories, not invoices disguised as pleas for help. Evelyn began with her usual performance. "We're in crisis. The lake house is slipping through our fingers. The bank is breathing down our necks. Without unity, we'll lose everything your husband cherished." Victoria leaned forward, eyes burning. "And you think walking away makes you innocent? No, you've betrayed this family. You've made us beg in public, humiliated us in front of friends. And for what? So you could keep a few paychecks?" Angela folded her hands calmly on the table. "For my children." The words cut through the air, steady, deliberate. "For years, I worked double shifts. I missed birthdays, holidays, rest, so that I could keep this family afloat. I paid taxes on a house I wasn't welcome in. I bought groceries for tables I never sat at. I fixed problems that weren't mine, and in return, she let her gaze sweep the room. You excluded me, you shamed me, you turned my sacrifices into expectations. Calvin shifted uncomfortably. Angela, you don't understand. No, Calvin, she interrupted. I understand perfectly. You all saw me as a wallet, not a wife, not a sister, not a daughter, just a resource. Well, that resource is gone. Evelyn's face reddened. Daniel would never forgive this. He believed in family. Angela's throat tightened at the mention of her husband, but her voice didn't waver. Daniel believed in love, in respect, in standing together. Don't you dare use his name to justify draining the life out of me while calling it loyalty. The silence that followed was heavy. Even Victoria, sharp-tongued and relentless, faltered for a moment. Angela rose from her chair, her hands steady. I'm not your bank anymore. I'm not your scapegoat. I have 2 children who are my real family, and I will not sacrifice them or myself for you again. Victoria sneered. So you're just walking away? Angela met her eyes. No, I'm standing up. She turned and walked toward the door. Behind her the voices rose, pleading, accusing, shouting. But Angela didn't stop. Outside the air was crisp, the sky streaked with the gold of late afternoon. She felt her chest expand with each breath, as though she had been carrying a weight for so long she'd forgotten what it meant to breathe freely. When she reached the street, Chloe and Marcus were waiting in the car. Chloe gripped the steering wheel, eyes fixed on her mother, searching. Marcus leaned forward from the back seat, anxious. Angela slid into the passenger seat and closed the door. For a moment, the 3 of them sat in silence, the echo of the Robinsons' voices still ringing in Angela's ears. Then Chloe asked softly, "Did you tell them?" Angela nodded, her eyes glistening but her smile firm. "I told them everything, and I walked out." Marcus grinned for the first time in days. About time. As Chloe pulled away from the curb, Angela looked out the window at the fading house in the distance. It was still standing, but something inside it had cracked, something that could never be repaired. And for the first time since Daniel's death, Angela didn't feel tied to it anymore. She was free. The week after Angela walked out of the Robinsons' house, the air in her small apartment felt different, lighter, as though some invisible chain had been cut. The walls no longer seemed to press in on her. Even the creak of the old floorboards sounded like freedom instead of burden. Marcus noticed it too. He walked with a new spring in his step, his hoodie zipped halfway, his earbuds bouncing as he hummed along to music. Chloe, though still buried under textbooks, had stopped sighing so heavily between pages. They didn't say it out loud, but Angela knew. Her children finally felt chosen. It was Chloe who noticed the letter first. "Ma, you got mail." She set the envelope down on the table, heavy ivory with a gold emblem on the flap. Angela frowned. She wasn't used to receiving anything that looked expensive. Inside was a card embossed with silver script. "You are cordially invited to the Coleman Foundation Annual Gala." At the bottom, in neat handwriting, was a note. "Angela, I'd be honored if you and your children could join me. Richard." Angela ran her fingers over the card, uncertain. She had never been to a gala. The word itself sounded like something out of a movie, too grand, too polished, too far from her world of scrubs and grocery store coffee. Chloe leaned over her shoulder. "You should go." Angela shook her head. "It's not for people like us." Chloe smiled wryly. "Maybe that's exactly why you should." The night of the gala, Angela stood in front of the mirror in a borrowed dress. Chloe had helped her choose it from a second-hand boutique, simple black, the fabric soft against her skin, cut just right to flatter without drawing too much attention. She felt awkward, tugging at the hem, smoothing non-existent wrinkles. "Ma," Chloe said firmly, "you look beautiful." Marcus grinned from the doorway, dressed in his one good blazer. "Like a boss." Angela laughed, shaking her head. "You two are trouble." The ballroom shimmered with light, crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, tables draped in linen so white it almost glowed. Angela felt small at first, out of place among men in tuxedos and women in gowns that cost more than her monthly rent. But Richard was there, waiting near the entrance. He wore a tailored suit, but it wasn't the clothes Angela noticed. It was the way his face lit up when he saw her, genuine and warm. "Angela," he said, stepping forward. "You came." She smiled nervously. "I wasn't sure we belonged here." "You belong exactly where you are," Richard said softly. Then he glanced at Marcus and Chloe. "And so do they." Throughout the evening, Angela watched her children in awe. Marcus mingled shyly at first, then found his way into a conversation with one of Richard's colleagues about sports. Before long, he was laughing, his eyes shining brighter than Angela had seen in months. Chloe, meanwhile, was drawn to a table of medical professionals. One of them, a professor from a prestigious university, listened intently as Chloe spoke about her studies. He handed her a business card, saying, "Reach out when you're ready. We have scholarships for students like you." Angela's chest swelled with pride, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. This wasn't just an evening of glitter and speeches. It was a glimpse of doors opening, for her children, for their futures. Later, Richard found Angela standing near the balcony, watching the city lights shimmer beyond the tall glass windows. "It suits you," he said, joining her. Angela shook her head, smiling faintly. No, I'm more at home in sneakers and scrubs." "I don't mean the dress," Richard said gently. "I mean this being here, being seen, having people recognize your worth." Angela looked away, her throat tight. "I'm not used to it." "Then maybe it's time you got used to it." She turned to him, studying his face. There was no pity in his eyes, no condescension, just respect, and something else, something that scared her as much as it warmed her. "Richard," she began, her voice low, "I don't want to be anyone's charity case." His expression softened. "Good, because I'm not offering charity, I'm offering partnership. Friendship, and maybe, when you're ready, more than that, but only if it's what you want." For a long moment, Angela said nothing. The music swelled behind them, violins rising like a tide. Inside her, old walls trembled. She had built her life around sacrifice, around silence, around giving without receiving. To imagine something else, a love that asked nothing, that simply was, felt both impossible and dangerously hopeful. Finally, she smiled, just a small curve of her lips, but real. "We'll see." Richard grinned back, not pressing, not rushing. "We will." When Angela returned home that night, she slipped off her heels and sat on the edge of the bed. Her feet ached, her dress wrinkled, but her heart was lighter than it had been in years. Marcus was already asleep, his blazer tossed on the chair. Chloe was still awake, reading the professor's card for the 100th time. She looked up at her mother, eyes bright. "See, Ma, sometimes the right doors do open." Angela nodded, stroking her daughter's hair. "Yes, sometimes they do." She turned out the light, her soul humming with something unfamiliar but welcome. Not fear, not guilt, not exhaustion. A year later, the apartment no longer felt bare. Where once there had been only echoing walls and borrowed furniture, now there were signs of life everywhere. Marcus's basketball poster thumbtacked above his bed, Chloe's textbooks piled high on the desk she insisted on buying herself, a row of potted plants along the kitchen window that Angela watered every morning. The peace lily had bloomed twice that year. Angela liked to think it was a sign. Life had not become magically easy. The bills still came, the shifts at the hospital were still long, and sometimes Angela woke with an ache in her bones that reminded her she was 50 and had carried more than her share of burdens. But there was no one bleeding her dry anymore. Her paychecks were hers, her choices were hers, and with that freedom her children had flourished. Marcus, now 17, stood taller, more confident. He had saved enough from his part-time job to buy himself a second-hand laptop, and he spent evenings writing essays for scholarship applications. Sometimes Angela would catch him practicing speeches again, his voice filling the apartment with a power that made her heart swell. Chloe had been accepted into a summer research program through the professor she met at Richard's gala. She spent long hours studying, but she no longer looked weighed down. When she smiled, it was with the light of someone who believed her future was within reach. Angela's sacrifices had once been invisible, swallowed into the bottomless well of the Robinsons' demands. Now they had blossomed into visible hope in her children's lives. Richard remained a steady presence. He didn't overwhelm her or press too close. Instead, he became a quiet companion, someone who brought coffee to the hospital when she worked back-to-back shifts, who took Marcus to a Pistons game, who listened to Chloe's nervous rambling about her exams as though every word mattered. Angela found herself laughing more when he was around. She also found herself afraid sometimes, afraid of leaning on someone again. But Richard's patience, his willingness to let her move at her own pace, softened that fear. One crisp October evening, almost exactly a year after their first meeting, Richard invited Angela and her children to dinner at a small restaurant downtown. Nothing grand, no chandeliers or speeches, just warm lighting and the smell of rosemary bread fresh from the oven. After dessert, he reached into his pocket and placed a small velvet box on the table. Angela froze, her breath caught. "Before you panic," Richard said quickly, his eyes kind, "this isn't about saving you or rescuing you. You've already done that for yourself. This is about choosing a partner who respects that strength. Angela, will you marry me?" Chloe gasped softly, a hand flying to her mouth. Marcus grinned wide, his eyes shining. Angela looked at Richard, her heart hammering. For years, she had given everything and received so little. For years, she had confused sacrifice with love. Now, for the first time, she saw what true love could look like: respect, partnership, freedom. She reached across the table, her hands steady. "Yes," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes." Months later, as Thanksgiving approached, Angela stood in her kitchen, their kitchen, preparing a modest meal with Chloe and Marcus. The turkey was smaller, the table still simple, but laughter filled the air. There were no guilt-ridden phone calls, no demands disguised as traditions, no conditions for belonging. Angela looked around at her children, at the home they had built together, and smiled. This was family, real family, and it required nothing more than love. Angela Robinson's story wasn't about wealth or revenge. It was about reclaiming dignity, about discovering that family is not measured by blood or obligation, but by love freely given. It was about a widow who had carried the world on her back, only to realize her worth was never in what she gave away, but in what she chose to keep for herself and her children. She had chosen them, and in choosing them, she had found herself. Dear readers, thank you for walking with Angela through her journey of pain, sacrifice, courage, and rebirth. Her story may be fiction, but the struggles and triumphs mirror what many face in silence every day. May you find strength to choose yourself, to choose love that respects and uplifts, and to build families rooted in kindness, not obligation. I wish you and your families good health, peace, and happiness. With gratitude, the author.